So we're going to take a look at the code for this jQuery photo viewer. And so how this works is when it first displays, you'll notice that the first thumbnail is faded and that's what is showing. And then if we click on a different one, you'll notice the old one fades out, the new one fades in, and now the thumbnail down here is faded and the tiger is not. So we click on another one. This all happens super, super fast. So if I click on the next one, this will fade out and the next one will fade in and so on. Okay, and then we've got a little section here where they're just going to love these prints, so they're going to buy them. And now we will take a look at the code. Now the textbook author does something very similar to this, so we're just going to look through this code. It's pretty much identical to the textbook code. So we have some CSS. We're not really going to look through the CSS in great detail. You'll notice that I did kind of label the sections, but this is CSS that we've used before. The only thing I do want to point out is that we, for the location of the image in the photo viewer, which is its little container, we are using absolute positioning, and that is kind of important. So photo viewer image is absolute, but the photo viewer itself is relative to its location on the page. And the photo viewer is what this image is displayed in. So as far as its location on the page, that is relative, but the image has to be absolute inside that. Okay, and we are going to take a look at our code. So up at the top, we have several global variables. We have a request, which is the image they want to show. We have the current variable, which is storing the current image, the image that is being displayed. We have a cache that we are going to be adding the images to so that they can redisplay quicker. We have the photo viewer ID, which is going to be our container, and we are storing that in a variable called frame. So let's take a look at where that photo viewer is. Okay, so this is the location where we're going to store the larger photo. It's the container for the larger photo. And then we have a thumbs variable, and that is storing all of our thumbnail class. So where are the thumbnail class? Well, here's thumbnails, okay, and then each one of those has a class set to thumb. And you may also notice that the very first one is active. That is why the tiger is faded when the page first displays. Then we're going to, let's look through this little crossfade function, because this gets called basically anytime a thumbnail is selected. Okay, we're going to get this function is going to be called. So whether the image is coming from the cache or it's coming from the web, it is going to be running through this function. So you'll see that we're pulling in the image. This is the image that we want to display. And it's checking to see if the image that we want to display is the current one. Okay, so that would be a scenario like this, where I'm displaying the tiger and I'm clicking the tiger. Or maybe I get impatient and I'm clicking around, and not that anybody ever gets impatient. So basically, it's going to fade out the former image, okay? And then it needs to calculate where this new image is going to go. And so it is setting the left margin and the top margin for our CSS for this image. So it's taking the image width and dividing it by 2, and the image height and dividing it by 2. And it's negative because it wants to subtract out that setting, and that will give it the location that it needs to put the image. So it is absolute positioning using margin left and margin top, And it is basically taking half of the width and half of the height and subtracting that out. Then it's going to take our new image, which is the one we got passed, stop any animation going on that, and it's going to fade it into view. And then it makes that new image the current image. So this is going to get called every time we select a different thumbnail. So we're going to run through this little event handler, and this happens when we click on the thumbnails. There's a lot going on in here, and it happens really, really fast. So it is a little hard to actually see all of these components executing. Okay, so that's kind of where the difficulty is in looking at this code. If we didn't have high-speed internet, it would be a lot easier to see all of this going on. But basically, when they click on a thumbnail, we've got a little image variable that we are creating, and we are storing the path to that image. And then we take that path and we make it the request. We are preventing the default from occurring, and this would be the default when we click on a link. We are removing the active class from all of the thumbnails, and we are adding it to the one they clicked on. Okay, so when we click on one of these, you see how it fades? That has the active class on it. When it first loads, the active class is on Tiger, and that's why it's fading. Okay. Then what it's doing is it's checking the cache to see if the image, okay, if the source, which is the href here, is set to false. If it's set to false, that means it is in the cache, the image is in the cache, and we can call crossfade using that cached image. And we already looked at the crossfade function. So you know that it fades the old one out, fades the new one in. Okay, so that will display the images really quickly. If the image is not in the cache, and it will not be in the cache the first time you display it, okay? So the first time it displays, it is not in the cache. So we are formatting an image tag, and we are then setting is loading to true. So what this means is that it's retrieving the image from the web. Okay, that's what is loading true means. Once the image is retrieved, we actually set is loading to false, which is why we can check to see if it's false up here, and then we know it's in the cache. Okay, so here is where we're putting it into the cache, and is loading is set to true because we're retrieving it and we're trying to put it in there. So when the image is loaded, okay, so image.onload, when it is loaded, then we run through this little anonymous function. So we're going to hide it while we, position it and do all of this stuff. So we're hiding it. We are removing the is loading class because now it's loaded, right? So we don't want it to say is loading anymore. We're removing is loading. Then we are updating what we have in the cache. We are setting is loading to false. And then we're checking to see if the request is still the current image. Okay, so, and that happens when people get impatient, right? So if I start clicking around here, it could be that the current image is this lighthouse, but I've now clicked on the pier. Okay, so when people get impatient, it creates some problems, and we do have to account for that. So it's checking to see if the request is still equal to the source. And if it is, awesome, we're calling crossfade, and it's going to display it. Okay. And that is an asynchronous loading issue. And if you have slower internet, or maybe there's some kind of a glitch on their system, we could run into that problem. Now, prior to the image loading, we do add the isLoading class to the frame, and we have some attributes on the image that we have set. So for the source, we're going to put in what we stored in source, which was this.href, and then we've got a title. If we're storing a title, if one was given, otherwise we just do a blank. Okay, so all of this happens when they click on a thumbnail. Now, this very last line of code, this is going to run when the page first loads. So when the page first loads, none of the thumbnails have been clicked. So what this is doing is it is simulating clicking a thumbnail. And the 0 indicates it's the first thumbnail. So basically, if nothing is clicked, the EQ method constructs a new jQuery object, and basically it's simulating a click. That's all it's doing. So it's giving us the starting point. Okay, and that is all of the code. And I know this code gets a little confusing to look at. That is kind of the downside to high-speed internet. If it was slower, you'd actually be able to see all of this happening, but it happens really fast.